After picking up the Sony A7 IV, I already was starting to think about how I was going to rig this camera out. It's a great camera for video, and for video rigs, I really do two different things. One is a run and gun setup, and the next is a bigger, beefier setup that I can put rails on and a V-mount battery plate and a big battery and a Mattebox on the front. So I'm going to do those two builds today. I'm going to quickly go through them as fast as I can, but also give you some details on why I picked these parts as well. I'll be using mostly Smallrig parts since that's what I have already. There are other companies out there, but I find this is kind of the sweet spot for performance and price. To start off, let's put our camera in the cage. I'll be using the Smallrig cage that's compatible with the A7 IV or A7S3, depending on which little adapter you have on the side here. One very interesting thing about this cage though, is that it has an Arca Swiss plate built into the bottom of it. I found this really handy as I have a lot of Arca Swiss tripods that I like to take my camera quickly on and off of. One thing it was strange with though, is if you have a fluid head, the fluid head, it mounts your camera sideways on the fluid head. So it's kind of going the wrong direction. If you're using this with a fluid head tripod, you'll have to use the adapter plate on the bottom like you would with any other camera. Let's get the camera in the cage. Now that our camera is in the cage, we'll add our slim, low profile NATO top rail. This is so we can put our NATO top handle in here, but I have the low profile mount here. I forget exactly how long this is. I'll link it in the description below, but this just mounts right on top so we can put our handle right on here. Now that we have our NATO top rail on, we will add our NATO top handle. The lightweight grip is, as the name suggests, lighter weight than most grips by cutting out most of the material in the center while still retaining a lot of the mounts and different kind of mounting points you have. It was important for me for a handle to have the front monitor locking mount because that's how I mount my monitors to the front so they don't twist around at all, and they're very sturdy. So it was nice that this lightweight handle here had all of the same mounts, but it was just lighter weight, and it also has a grip on the bottom instead of just being straight to metal. So that's pretty nice. With our handle on, we'll now add our monitor mount to the front of the handle. This is the locking monitor mount. I will have that linked in the description below. Like I said, this is my favorite one because it doesn't twist once you have the monitor installed. Now with our monitor mount installed, I will put my monitor on. I have my Ninja 5 in a cage, and I've been using this in a cage since it came out because I put this on and off of my rigs a lot, and I don't want that bottom port to strip out on my monitor, so it's easier to put it in a cage, and then if anything gets damaged around here, I can replace my cage for a lot cheaper than I can go send my Ninja out for service and then not have a monitor for a while. Now that we have the monitor on our camera, we can add one of my favorite new things, and that is the follow focus. I'll be using the short rod that comes with the follow focus in the box. I'll be mounting the rod holder to the left side of my camera cage, and this is cool because the top of the rod holder is also a NATO plate. So if you want to add a side handle to your camera, you can do so and just use this NATO plate that's built in. Alternatively, if you didn't want to use that NATO plate on top, you can mount this to the top of your cage. I find this to be a little problematic, specifically because I use this angled cold shoe holder for my wireless labs. So I tend to keep this on the side, and with it on the side, I can still mount my DD Pocket Wireless to this and have no issues. Now that we have our rod holder and our NATO mount onto the side of our cage, I'm going to put the gear on our lens so we can use the follow focus with it. It's easier to do this before you put the rod on so you're not fighting with the front of the lens trying to go under or around the rod. Just easier to do it before you put that on there. Now that we have the gear on our lens, we can easily put the rod and the follow focus on. So let me add those right now. Now that we have our gear and the follow focus on our camera, we can use this to manually adjust focus of our camera. The Smallrig follow focus also has these hard stops where if you want to just focus exactly on a certain point, you can tighten these screws, use this stopper, and it won't let you go past a certain point. However, if you don't want this at all, you can just lift this little lever up, and now you can focus throughout the whole range. This is kind of nice if you'll be doing small controlled focuses and you just want a hard stop. But if you don't need this, this is a pretty specialized thing that I don't really use too often. I just like to go throughout the range manually. Next, we need to connect our monitor to our camera. There's really two ways of doing this. Since the A7 IV can't record ProRes RAW, that's what I use my Condor Blue cable for. And the Condor Blue cable is nice because it's coiled and it kind of gets out of your way. But if you're going to be adjusting the follow focus here, it does project straight out of the side of your camera. So to get around that, I've been using a 90-degree cable. And if you're using this with a Sony A7 III, you will not be able to record ProRes RAW with this cable. But if you're just using this for a monitor, it is a great cable because it goes out of your way and it doesn't get in between you and either a side handle or this follow focus on the side. So this is my go-to lightweight run and gun A7 IV setup. And like I said earlier, it's nice when you put the follow focus to the bottom because this camera has a 45-degree cold shoe mount that you can mount wireless audio systems directly to the side and then route this into your camera. This is nice because the 45-degree cold shoe is right next to the spot where you plug in your microphones to begin with. So now this is a package with wireless audio, and it is a really lightweight run and gun setup. However, if I wanted to add a V-mount battery and a Mattebox to this setup, I can also do so and have enough battery life to last all day with my wireless audio, my Ninja 5, and my camera being powered off of a single source. So let's take this follow focus apart, take this rail off, and I'll show you how I rig my camera up for unlimited battery power. So here are the parts of a more all-day filming rig for the A7 IV. All I did to modify our run and gun setup was to remove our follow focus and the rod for our follow focus here. I'll be keeping this NATO side handle on, you'll see why in a little bit, but I will begin by adding the quick release plate to the base plate for our rods. This is nice because this base plate has 2 points of contact to our quick release plate, so our camera, when it's attached to the rods, won't be able to move side to side. It will be securely held in place. So I put our base plate onto our rod holder, and you can do this the opposite way, but I find myself, if I'm gonna be putting my big giant rig onto a tripod, I'll just put the tripod's base plate onto the base plate of the rods. So that's kind of confusing, but it's easier if you wanna take your camera quickly off your rods and then you have a run and gun setup. Next, we'll put our quick release plate on the bottom of our cage. Our cage does have that Arca Swiss plate baked into it. However, if we were to slide it onto our quick release plate, it would be sideways. That's what I was talking about earlier with the fluid head tripod situation. This is nice for general tripods, but if you'll be using base plates or quick release tripod plates with fluid heads, this is a bit of a problem. In our case, that's not a big deal. We'll just put the regular base plate onto the bottom of our camera. Again, this has 2 screws to eliminate any kind of turning or binding that our camera could do. Now that we have our base plate on the bottom of our camera, before we put it onto our rod holder, we are going to put our rods into the bottom of the rod holder here. Be sure to leave a little bit of room for our V-mount battery plate back here. And this is nice because there's 2 different points where we're contacting our rods. So we don't have to just rely on one spot of our rod holder where we just have to tighten it down really hard and hope these rods don't move. When you have these 2, I've found that I don't have to tighten them a lot and the rods still don't go anywhere. So now that we have our rods on our base plate, now the easy part, we can just put our camera on the base plate and lock it down. So now that our camera is on the rods, we can add our V-mount battery plate back here and then plug in our camera. The V-mount battery plate I've been using with my Sony A7 III and my Sony A7 IV is one that has an articulating arm, so we can attach it to our rods and then move it out of the way if we have to flip out our articulating screen on our A7 IV or our A7 III. It's happened to me multiple times in the past where I used a cheese plate and a V-mount battery holder with some rod holders, and every time I wanted to flip out the screen of my Sony A7 III, I had to remove all the power, unscrew this, flip out my screen, put it back on, and then repeat the process. So that was really annoying, and whenever I saw a V-mount adapter plate that could articulate, I was really excited. So with the articulating arm tightened down and the screen flipped out, we can now add our V-mount battery. The V-mount battery I'm using is the FX Lion Nano 2. I did a whole video on the different powering options for the Sony A7 IV and A7S III. I'll leave a link to that at the end of the video if you're curious about the different powering options of your camera's regular battery, V-mount, and even USB banks. So I'll leave a link to that at the end, but for now, we're using the FX Lion Nano 2. To get power to our Ninja 5 from our battery plate, we'll have to use a short patch cable and the original battery adapter that came with our Ninja 5. So plugging in our battery adapter and then plugging the patch cable into the adapter and then plugging the other side into the 8-volt power on our V-mount battery plate, we can now turn our battery plate on with our V-mount battery, and we can turn our Ninja 5 on. The reason I chose this FX Lion battery is because it has a USB-C power delivery port on it. It's 9 volts, 3 amps, and you can plug this directly into your Sony A7 IV, and it will charge it while you have a battery in the camera already. This is important because if you're using this and you have an incident where something will trip up and remove the power to your camera, you still have a battery in your camera, so the feed won't get interrupted, and if you're recording, your file won't get corrupted. Now that everything is hooked up, our V-mount battery is powering our camera and our monitor, and we're getting a feed to our monitor. So next we want to put our side handle on, and thanks to leaving the rod holder with the NATO mount, this is really simple with our NATO wooden side handle. We can just put this on the handle and just slide right in place. Now with our side handle on, we have another point of contact that makes it really simple to just take control of our camera when we need to, or we can use the top handle for easy access. Once we start rigging up our camera, it's really easy to catch a cable or not really have a great holding point. So the side handle and the top handle are really helpful once we start getting more weight on the camera. Next, I'll be putting on my Mattebox, and I'll be using the Smallrig Mini Mattebox Pro. And to hold everything in place, I will be using the Mattebox holder. I am using the 50mm 1.2 G Master, which has a 72 front millimeter thread size. The Smallrig Mini Mattebox Pro has a 95mm, so I used the 72 to 95mm adapter, and then now I just meet this up with the front element and screw it down into place. I have the Mini Mattebox on barely, but now I like to slide this adapter on here and attach it to the bottom of the Mini Mattebox Pro. It's easier when the Mini Mattebox Pro isn't clamped down all the way to put this holder on, because there is a little bit of adjusting that you have to do. And now that the adapter is on, I can fully tighten the front ring on the Mattebox. When it comes time to put your filters into the Mini Mattebox Pro, the Mini Mattebox Pro has these little sleds that you put your filters into, and then you can slide these filters into the Mattebox. So it's nice that you don't have to constantly be touching your filters. I love the fact that I don't have to be handling these and trying to just slide my filters into this whole Mattebox. So once your filter is in the sled, you can adjust this and open the top flag. And following the slide indicators on these different sleds, they just slide right into each other. So if we match these arrows up, we can slide this in, and make sure if you're sliding these in to push this far enough to hear it click into place. And now it's firmly in there, and our sled isn't going to accidentally slide out anyway. And finally, we can put our follow focus on. I know this is weird to put it on very last, but since I knew we were going to be putting our handle and a Mattebox on here, there's a lot going on these rails, so it's easier to put this on and adjust the spacing of everything afterwards. So let me put that on really quick. So this is what the final form of this absolute behemoth of a setup looks like. This is my all-day setup, and ideally if I would be using the follow focus, I probably wouldn't have the handle on, and if I was using autofocus, I would just remove the follow focus module. But just to show you the complete, absolute everything on it rig, here you go. This is nice because it's powered by a V-mount battery, and if my battery dies, I don't have to use a NPF battery, an NPF-Z battery, and be battling the internal pocket wireless battery. I can just swap out a single battery and everything is instantly charged up again. I honestly use the run and gun rig a lot more because it's easier to rig up. However, for all day shoots, rigging up the camera and letting the camera just get out of the way and let you film is really nice. Which version of this rig do you guys prefer? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't seen my review of the 50mm G Master lens, I'll leave a link to that on screen now. And I'll also leave a link to my Mac Studio review. Thank you guys for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.